missed this one. All right. Okay, I believe we're recording. I'm just going to change our screen here. There we go. Okay, we've got a little bit of seal. A change is going to come today because this is a big day, actually, cost of goods. And I'm not going to lie, I am intimidated as heck to do this one with you over a webinar. This is a very gray area, even for the best of the experts out there, whether they're bookkeepers or accountants, really locking in on the cost of goods. Everybody considers cost of goods differently. So I am going to show you, full disclosure here, I'm going to show you the method that I use when I'm working with clients one-on-one, so that you can actually see the process that I go through, but hopefully you can get some aha moments today, because there is when businesses are losing money, when the clients that I'm working with and they're coming to me and they're saying, you know what, we're operating at a deficit, we don't understand why that is, we're making top line revenue, right, the money's coming in, our operating expenses, we've cut in every possible area, and for some reason we just can't seem to turn a profit. 99.9% of the time, it is found here in the cost of goods, which is really about our pricing strategies. So I'm going to, every time I do this, I take it's almost like a two-tiered approach. We're doing this for two reasons today. The first reason why we're doing it is to actually see exactly what we are out of pocket to deliver that specific product or service, so that we might realize that we need to adjust our price. First and foremost, we need to adjust the price. The template that I have for you, the second tier you'll see, is that it'll take out what I call the operational labor. So today you'll be surprised that we are going to be accounting for the time that you or your employees actually contribute to selling a product or service, because they would not be doing that effort, they would not be applying that effort if it was not for that transaction. So unless we calculate it, right, you might be very surprised at the end of this exercise that your costs in to sell that product or service are a lot higher than you originally anticipated. Every time I work with a client, this is the case. The costs are always higher than they originally thought, which means they then have to adjust their price in many cases. Now, I don't want you to worry about the price today, because on Monday, we're going to do a weighted pricing model. So because in almost every single case, when I'm working with a client, they need to adjust their price. They've been undervaluing what it is that they've actually been offering. And when we go through that mechanism, it will allow you to defend the price that you're putting out there in the market. But first, we actually have to figure out what you're out of pocket so we can set that price. So a couple of pieces here today, just so you know, this exercise, direct costs, we have to do this for each revenue stream. This is why, again, I asked you to only come up with 2 to 4, because you're going to see this exercise is not for the faint of heart. This is usually where I get challenged, the clients get challenged, but I want to try to give you the simplest way through it. And I'd like you to come up with a base number. And if we need to add some contingency or error margin, we're going to. But I think once you get through the first one, the second, third, fourth become a lot simpler. So just trust the process in the first one. I'm going to give you lots of examples here so that you're not left with a blank slate trying to figure it out on your own. Okay, so just so that we are clear, direct costs, also known as cost of goods, COGS, or variable expenses or variable costs, they all mean the same thing. And again, it is the cost that is directly attributed to selling that product or service. I will tell you right now, product-based businesses today are going to have an easier go of this exercise, because they don't necessarily have all of the operational labor associated with that specific transaction. So I'll let you know that off the top, but there is a caveat to that. And that is that oftentimes the more expensive the product, the more operational labor that gets attached to it. So I want you to think about the difference between a glass of lemonade, right? And then going to buy a Mercedes-Benz. Even in the car realm, right? Maybe a VW Bug over a Lamborghini. When you think about the effort in to sell the Lamborghini, right? And the service levels that need to be met and the education and the all of that that gets attached to it, that would be a very different proposition as well, right? So sometimes the more expensive the product, the more operational labor that goes into making sure that product or service is sold. So again, I want you to trust me on this process. You're going to be like, oh, isn't that an operational expense? Yes, some of these expenses that we're going to look at today are found in that bottom line, are found in your indirect or your operating expenses, but we need to make sure that we are accounting for it in this first phase of cost of goods so that we know what we're out of pocket to actually deliver that product or service. Okay, I think I'm belaboring that. I think enough on that. Now, I want to show you that a part of my philosophy in figuring this out is to actually break down. I'm going to move over to the service side of things for a bit, and then I'm going to come back to product when it comes to phase 3. But from a service side, right, if we have a business that is a service or we have a very expensive product that we are selling, I'm going to get you to break this down into 4 different phases, and this is all in your template. But phase 1 is what I call the design phase. And what I mean by design phase, it is the phase that we have created awareness with the prospect. So whatever that was, it was an ad, it was social media, there was a referral, whatever that looked like, that's all done. And now we've got direct contact with the prospect. The prospect is in the interested stage. It's like, oh, you know what? I saw the ad for the Lamborghini. I'm interested in learning more, right? So now we've got this direct contact. Now we actually start moving into the sales process, right? So now we're going from interested to create, then to create engagement, and then into sold. So phase 1 is where what I call the design. It's all of the effort that goes in to actually securing the business now. So I'm going to come to examples afterwards, but you know, some high level examples. It's the proposal writing, it's the discovery interview, it's the quantifying them or qualifying them as a solid lead, right? It's that whole process. So we don't have the business yet, but we know that they're a potential candidate for that business. That's what I call design. The second phase is what I call develop. And develop is the prospect has says, yes, we want to do business with you. We're going to go ahead and do it. You still haven't moved into delivery yet though. So for example, in a construction service business, now that the client has said yes, there might be things like, okay, we need to tweak the contract, we need to adjust some of the terms, we need to set the schedule, we need to set the client up in the books, we need to hire all the sub-trades, we need to actually start our ordering process. All of that happens in between the design phase and you haven't even delivered yet. There's all of that effort that goes in to making sure that sales and the expectations are going to be met with respect to delivery. Then delivery, phase 3, this is where most of you actually have a really good handle on your costs. Maybe with some of the exceptions of your labor, your operational labor, but mostly all of your materials are accounted for, all of your subcontractors are accounted for. We'll go through a couple of tips in phase 3. For your products, most of you, if you're product driven, you're probably going to get, here's our suggested retail. So you're going to feel like, okay, well, we don't really have much choice. Our cost is this, and you mark it up by 50, 100%, right? So phase 3 is going to be simpler for you. But again, I'm going to give you some tips in this and some areas that I usually see missed out on. Phase 4, again, is a phase that I see 99% of the businesses forgetting about here. Phase 4 is what I call the defend stage. This is the stage where you are creating raving fans, exceeding the expectation of the client, and creating huge referral sources from them. So in phase 4, this is everything we do after the job is done to really step up, to own that business, and to make sure that they're very comfortable referring us going forward. So I'm breaking down each one of these phases because I am going to ask you to go through each one of these phases to figure out your costs. Now, as we move over here on the other side, I can hear you already going, what the heck is this today? For each phase, we have 3 buckets. We have a bucket of inputs. So most people call this just material, and I move away from the word material just because I think it tends to limit what we actually think of when it comes to costs. So all the costs in, all of your inputs, including material, including any sort of losses. So especially if you're in the food industry, even in retail, the amount of garments and merchandise and inventory that I see clients receiving where they have to write off a certain portion because it's damaged or they have to send it back, right? And then just the amount of time to get that rectified can take time. We've got to account for that. We've got to account for merchant fees, right? 2.63, 2.7, depending on who it is that you're working with. There's a merchant fee. There's a transaction fee that is attached to that specific transaction if they're using a credit card, right? It doesn't fall into operating. It's not a fixed amount. It is variable. It fluctuates with respect to what we're selling. Shipping costs, duty, packaging, discounts. This is where we put, if you are discounting, we need to account for that in your cost of goods. Then the next bucket I'm going to get you to consider is labor. And by labor, I mean operational labor. So these are the people that you have employed. They are taking a salary or an hourly wage from the business, right? But we are going to be accounting for the energy and the effort that they expend to sell that particular product or service, because you'll be amazed at how much of your money is being invested in their effort to that specific client. Don't worry, we're going to take it off at the end, but we're going to look at it at the beginning to actually see what we're out of pocket. So here, how we're going to do it is what task, how much time is required, and what do we pay them, including source deductions. And hopefully light bulbs will go off for you today. Then we take a look at subcontractors. Again, usually these are pretty self-explanatory. Everyone has an easy time with these in each one of these categories for the most part, although there's definitely some pieces that are overlooked. But just making sure, again, we'll talk about tips, but you know, what are the terms of the contract? How long are these prices actually valid for? When do they expire, right? Are there any sort of reimbursable expenses that are not being accounted for here? Are there per diems? Are there travel? Are there fuel, right? All of these extra things that if we don't account for it in this space here, it is just coming off our bottom line profit. So we want to get as many numbers in here as possible because that way we're protected, right? So I hope that that makes sense. So this sheet here, this whole playbook obviously is in the equipment room, the planning to profit equipment room, and it's just listed as playbook. So if you need a snapshot of that, that's exactly where it is. Okay. This is not for the faint of heart today. I have to roll with me. So the tool that you are going to be using today is in your workbook where all of your, I'm trying to move this dashboard so I can see what I'm doing, where all of your other worksheets are. And the tab that you are using is step 4, price for profit. So step 4, price for profit. Again, you are going to want to do this exercise for each one of your revenue streams. Now, what you can do, I don't know if any of you know how to do this, but to copy this, because you'll notice that you only have one tab, right? You might need to make 4 of them. So all you're going to do is you're going to go up here to this little corner box up here where the little triangle is, and you can just right-click, hit copy. Hope everybody's following. And then you come back down here to this plus sign, and this is going to give you a brand new sheet, right? It's saying sheet 1 right here. And then right here, again, you just right click again, and now you just hit paste. And I forget, let me just see which paste it is going to be. It's just your first paste button. So that's all you have to do. And now you're going to do that however many times, however many revenue streams. And now you can call these something differently if you want. You can say step 4 and then just price 4 and list revenue stream number 1. Step 4, price 4, list revenue stream number 2. So I hope that's clear for everybody, getting us set up on how many of these tabs you're going to need for your revenue streams. Okay. You will see here, I am going slow for my for my purposes too, so I can make sure, because this is an overwhelming topic, and I'm trying to go as slow as possible and make it as clear as possible for you. So just a tour of this tab so you know what we're working with here. Over here on the left-hand side, you will see that I am tried my best here to break down the phases. So phase 1, you have all of your costs pertaining to labor. Phase 1, the next block down, you have all of your costs pertaining to inputs. Then your next block down, all of your costs for phase 1 pertaining to subcontractors. It's the exact same thing for phase 2. You're going to see labor, inputs, contractors, and then phase 3, it's the same thing, labor. Now, I've added a monthly reoccurring here because for some of you, especially if you're in the construction phase, some of your projects might take a year, right? They might take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. So I've given you an opportunity here to actually say, if it's going to be monthly reoccurring for an extended amount of time, you can just drop down here and use this space. But if it's just a one-time charge, if these are smaller services, right, one-time transactions, probably within a month, just stick up here to your one-time charge. So super easy. I do want to draw your attention to that if this is a monthly reoccurring, if you decide to use anything down there, I want you to be very aware of this line right here, total project cost, because right now it is multiplying it by 12. So it's assuming this is an annual project and it's multiplying it by 12. If you need to adjust anything in here, you're going to have to go in and change this 12 number, right, to however many months it's going to be. If it's going to be a 6-month project, change it to 6. If it's going to be 18, change it to 18. I'm sorry that isn't more intuitive. It's the best I can do for you at this time. Then we get into, again, for phase 3, inputs done the exact same way, and for subcontractors, the exact same way. Phase 4, again, labor, inputs, subcontractors. So hopefully that's as clear as mud, quite literally. But I've tried to make that super simple for you. Okay, now let me walk you through this way so you can see what's happening. So as we start to move horizontally now, horizontally, what you're going to do in here, for example, task, let's just say it's a discovery interview. You decide that that is one of the first things that happens. Discovery interview, unit of measure, maybe by hour. Who's responsible for doing that interview? Is that you? Is that another team member? What is your hourly rate? So you probably take your monthly rate, right? And you are, if however many hours you work a week. So if you're saying, let's just say it's 40 hours a week times 4, that's 160 hours a month. And if your monthly salary is $5,000, whoever it is, you can divide that now by 160, and that's going to get you your hourly rate of $31.25. So let's say here that a discovery interview, let's say it's actually only 30 minutes, that you're making a commitment to spend 30 minutes of your time doing a discovery interview. That's 0.5 of an hour, right? And let's say, see, I've tried to think of everything here for you, but let's say in that rate of the, I forget what we said, $5,000, so $60,000 a year, that did not include source deductions. You can just add here another 20%, which is very generous for source deductions. You might recall me saying 16 to 20 before, right? And then if there's any additional expenses, I don't know, you can throw them in here. So you can see here that the discovery interview process, because that is someone's labor, even though it's an employee, that right now, out of pocket, $18.75 for that individual to have the discovery interview, or that initial call or coffee, whatever it is, with that prospect. So that's how we fill it out going horizontally. Very simple. Do not touch the markup value right now. Markup value is for pricing. We are so not there today. Please don't go there. That's definitely more complicated than it needs to be. You're going to do the exact same thing for inputs, but maybe this is a cost where it's like, okay, well, you know what? I am going to do travel. I'm going to budget for my travel, and my travel is going to be based on kilometers, and each kilometer is 55 cents. And I am going to be traveling 20 kilometers for that trip. Right there now, we know that that's $11 that you're out of pocket to get the business from this solidified prospect. I hope that is making sense for you. So you do this for each one. This might be, you know, as an example, one cost that comes up here is actually printing off a proposal. So each, you might find that just the printing of it is $20. So this might be per unit, right? So it's a unit cost, it's $20, and maybe you actually need 4 of them for that customer, because one goes to, maybe 2 go to influencers, 1 goes to a decision maker, and 1 you're keeping on file, right? So now that's $80. You see how these things add up? Pretty crazy. So just give it a stab today. Get your high level done, right? With respect to all of this, move into each revenue stream, and you can always come back and add details later. You can always do that. The details, leave the details for the end. Get your high level stuff done today for each product or service. Okay, I want to take you through, I've been working on this for you, this darn dashboard over here. Okay, I want to share with you what I often see being forgotten here when it comes to these different stages. So before I forget, because I might, because it's up here, one of the tips that I'm going to share with you in the email, and I was going to ask you this question, nobody can weigh in, but the question is, what is our annual rate of inflation? And our annual rate of inflation is typically about 2%. Some talk about it going to 1.79, others talk about it going up to 3, but on average, our government tends to say, you know what, it's safe if we budget for 2%. So let me tell you just right now, your prices every year should go up by at least 2%, if not 4%, for all of the extra costs here and there, right? That should be happening every year. If you don't do it every year and you decide to do it at the end of year 5, now your prices need to go up by 10%, and people notice that, right? So let's just be aware of that and making sure that you're accounting for that. Okay, so here's what I see when it comes to services, and for all of those product-based businesses out there, I want you to think if any of these resonate with you with respect to costs that you incur, even if you're selling a product. So under phase 1, which is the design phase, right? Which is, again, they're interested, but now you started the sales process. They have not yet agreed to do business with you. You still need to hook them. Here's costs I see forgotten, or here's costs that may be included in this phase for you. The discovery call that we talked about, qualifying the prospect, right? That might be a whole separate piece on your end where you have to qualify, you have to do research, whatever that may look like. Due diligence. This might be part of your qualifying prospect, or qualifying process, but things like credit checks, the Better Business Bureau, checking references, that's all time in. You might be doing a review needs assessment where you actually really truly understand what their pain points are and what their needs are, so that you can put together a proposal and a package that actually hits all of those key areas. Proposal creation, even the estimating process, right? I know for Sherry, in your case in particular, especially when it's business to business and these huge contract values, sometimes we can invest a week to 2 weeks simply on the estimating process and the proposal writing process without even being assured that we're going to get the business. So we need to account for that. one of the tools that is going to come in handy for you here is if you have any copies of previous estimates, that is going to be very helpful. And if some of you are doing this on behalf of business owners, I'm feeling for you, because that's the work that I do with clients. And I come to them and I say, okay, so tell me what your process looks like before you have the business and you're trying to get the process. They say, well, we put together a proposal. Okay, so how did you hear about the client? They're like, well, the client called in. And who took the call? Oh, well, I took the call. And how much time did you invest speaking with that person? Oh, well, that was 45 minutes. And well, oh yeah, and then I took them to lunch. Oh, and then I met their team. They forget all of this stuff. We forget all of this stuff. So you have to go through line by line. And when it's not making sense, when there's been a leap of, oh yeah, we just write the proposal, we've missed about 30 steps to get there, right? So you're gonna have to interview them. And yeah, it's not always the funnest piece of it, but almost limit yourself to like a half an hour, 45-minute time frame with them so that you start moving this process through faster. Subcontractor RFPs, right? So you know you're going to do the project, it needs to go out to everybody. That takes time. Prospect site visits, sales presentations, you do the dog and pony show, communication follow-up, team review and engagement. So now that you've got an estimate, does it go to the rest of the team for everyone to look at it, or do you just send it off, right? What's happening there? Proposal review, travel time. This is all just labor. This is all just time of people. This is not even material costs yet. And it's usually in this space, in phase 2 and in phase 4, where we forget to budget for these things. So I'm going to email this list to you. I would love it if you come up with any other costs here, share them with me, because I would love to grow this list. I noticed even typing it out, it was good for me, because usually it's always in my examples that I share with people. Now your inputs in phase 1, your fuel costs, your parking, your printed proposals, your meals and promotional costs, right? All of those things. Subcontractors involved in phase 1, it might include lawyers, right? To look over estimate. It might include copywriters. It might include designers for your proposals, editors that will go through it and adjust any spelling or grammar errors, industry experts, engineers, architects. All of the people that you need to put together a solid proposal is what you should be budgeting for. Phase 2 is the development. I explained to you, now you've won the business, now you need to get it set up before you deliver. Oftentimes, these expenses are forgotten. Modification to the terms or the agreement, how many, is a half an hour, is an hour, whatever it may be. Scheduling your entire team, scheduling the contractors and the sub-trades. Procurement, or even scheduling procurement, right? That whole piece. Setting up the client or the project in software systems, right? We forget about those things. Costs or input costs that we often forget about in phase 2. Things like project insurance, warranties, permits, merchant fees, shipping, duties, exchange rates, site signage, all of that sort of stuff. Subcontractors in phase 2, lawyers to go over the contracts now, making sure that all your risks are mitigated, especially if adjustments have been made. Government relations, you might be getting grant writers involved now, and maybe some sort of IRAP programs as well, knowing that you can leverage that. So all of those costs. Phase 3, I didn't go into a lot of effort here because I know that most of you are covering off these costs quite well. So again, just some labor efforts that I see forgotten, just the team leadership. So when I'm working with business owners, they've usually accounted for operational labor of their team members, but they forget about themselves and overseeing that team dynamic and giving that specific project X number of hours per week, right? Which is usually in reality what happens, answering all the questions. Maybe at this point too, you have social media updates now. Maybe you're sharing the world with the world, what's going on with that specific project. Client communication and updates. I know this is sounding business to business skewed, but this happens too with business to consumer. I have a client that does aesthetic work, cosmetic, I'm trying to think of medical grade cosmetic work, and it's all the same thing. So it's not necessarily the, you know, the length has shortened, but still all of the expertise, all of the sign off, all of the diligence, all of the explanatory process of exactly what's going to happen, usually that doesn't get budgeted for, and we need to do that here. The subcontractor costs. So again, here we might have really good terms with our subcontractors, but we might have expiry dates. So I want you to be very aware of that, because if there is an expiry date and this project is going to extend beyond that, you could find yourself extremely vulnerable. So making sure that you're locking that in. And then phase 4. So phase 4, this again is where I see a lot of people missing the boat, a lot of business owners. So how do you wow the client? How do you exceed their expectations? How do you create raving fans and referral sources out of each client you do business with? So maybe even in the delivery phase, you might be finding that you're going to do some promotion, that you're taking people out on maybe it's a monthly basis or a quarterly basis to get their team coming out. But some other pieces that I oftentimes see forgotten, especially in B2B right here, is relationship development with the team, with their team. Because in business to business, you have probably built a very solid relationship with 1 to 2 key individuals to allow for that business to happen. Your responsibility now is to build relationships horizontally, so with influencers and decision makers, and vertically within the team itself. This is what protects you long-term from losing that business, because people change, they move on to new jobs. And if you have redundancy with relationships within one of these spaces, you are going to protect yourself long-term. So invest in those relationships and budget for them here. Co-branded media releases are huge. Nobody ever budgets for this, but imagine you finishing a project and then being able to have budgeted for a release in that space. It might be a launch event. It might be any sort of refund. So by refund, what I mean here is there was a construction company that I did business with, and we knew that one of the biggest pain points that a lot of their customers went through is that projects always came in over budget and over time. And so a part of our strategy was to issue a rebate check at the end of the project saying, you know what, we actually came in under budget. So I think we had budgeted $2,500 for each project as a cost of goods, right? So it didn't come off the profit line, but then we wrote the customer the check saying, you know what, we actually came in under budget $1,326.43. Here's your check. That initiative in and of itself created not only a raving fan, but a fan and customers that were so happy that they started to refer other business. So just budget for it. Before I forget, budget here. If you're a social enterprise that is planting 1 tree for every t-shirt that you sell, you budget for that in your cost of goods. That does not come off your profit margin. You do not compromise the profit. You need that to grow a secure, sustainable business. Refunds we talked about. If your business to consumer, this might be the thank you notes, the follow-up notes, the follow-up gift, right? It might be a part of your referral strategy too, where for every 10 referrals, they get a free product. You need to start making sure that that is accounted for here in your costs. So for phase 4, I need you to think about the time that it's going to require you and your team to actually build the strategy and then to manage it. That's going to be labor in. It might be things like surveys too with your customer afterwards, right? Where that takes effort. You don't just hit the survey. You have to interpret the data then, and then let the customer know what you're doing with the data. That takes time. Budget for it. So you want to budget for that. You want to budget for the tools and the inputs that you're going to require in phase 4. And then you want to budget for any of the subcontractors that are needed to pull it off. Again, designers, event coordinators, government relations people, public relations people, media relations people, whoever it may be. How's everyone doing? Okay, well, you're probably not doing a thumbs up. Hopefully you are. I was nervous about today, I'm not going to lie. So another thing I want to draw your attention to, so phase 3, when we start looking at all of your costs in, oftentimes a cost that we forget to budget for because we think, oh, well, we just have it. It's in the storage shed. We'll just pull out that little piece of equipment. So again, I mentioned it yesterday, and I do have to apologize because I realized that there was a formatting issue, but at least I caught it, right? So nobody throw tomatoes at your screen yet. So this is, it's a bonus tab, and this is your equipment cost, and you will be shocked when you start writing down all of your pieces of equipment, the original value of the equipment, how long that piece of equipment is going to last. So even if you've paid it off, I want you to write this down because that equipment came at a cost to you. And we should be taking a look, and it's your choice whether or not you want to include it. But in most cases, right, this is your out of pocket for this equipment to be able to deliver the service. So original value, if you had an interest rate, my formulas were off here on the interest calculation. So you might want to come back every year and take a look at this. But on average, here's what we're going to be paying per year for interest. So our monthly carrying costs on interest, and then our monthly principal costs. That was a big piece that I missed in this. So your monthly principal costs. In here, you can put any, so all of this is automatically calculated for you here. So you just need to enter in data into the white areas. The light gray start to auto-populate, and now correctly that I fixed it. And then monthly maintenance. So this is if you've got big pieces of operational equipment that require regular maintenance, you're gonna wanna put in what that monthly maintenance cost is. And then if it requires insurance or licenses or whatever that may be, cover those things off. Because you might be surprised to see what your true monthly carrying costs on that piece of equipment are. And then you're going to get a daily rate, a half-day rate, a quarter-day rate, and an hourly cost as there is for you as well. So it's interesting when you start carrying this over, you might realize that you have been leaving a lot of money on the table when it comes to your pricing. And again, remember, the best in sector performers, your competitors that are the top of the charts, right? The big enterprises, they're operating at a 25 to 40% net profit. And they are charging a very specific rate because they are doing this math. And you aren't doing the math. First of all, you didn't know you had to do the math. And second of all, you're probably discounting your products and services. A lot of entrepreneurs have a hard time charging what they need to charge. You're discounting it because you're worried about the value that you're actually offering, right? We need to get our head wrapped around that. And if that's you, I'm going to encourage you to do the matrix after, because that's going to be an important piece of this. So with this template, because I made the error, what I'm going to be attaching today for you to your email is a fixed, it's just going to be this tab. So if you want to then take the tab and replace it into your worksheets, again, just copy, just like I showed you before. Up here, right click, copy, move it over to your new template, paste. Now, if you are like Sherry and you already did this exercise because I told you to yesterday, all you have to do is just copy this white piece over here. Copy your white, so just highlight, right click, copy, move it into the new template, and you can do that for this white, and all the rest is going to auto-populate for you. So should be pretty easy for you to be able to do that, and if not, I really sincerely apologize, but I'd rather you have the right number than the wrong number, so I take full responsibility for that. I see a question. So if I include the cost of insurance with the equipment, do I still include this in the COGS? Yes. So again, remember, we might be seeing some overlap here with respect to some of these operating expenses, but I want you to know exactly what you are out of pocket to offer that product or service. We have to figure out our pricing strategy, and that's why we're doing this today, right? So I hope that makes sense. That's a great question there, Sherry. So where I want to leave you before I turn it over to questions is I want to show you some examples so you can see how this comes together. So I'm going to show you this example first. This is an example of a construction company. And in this piece, this was project development. So in one construction company that I worked with, they had land development, project development, construction development, and then property management. And I'm not gonna lie, this probably took us about 40 hours to figure this out. But once we did, it was like a woo moment for them because they realized exactly what they were out of pocket. They realized they had been discounting their prices way too much. They were losing money. But I'm going to tell you, one of the best things, especially for you service-based businesses out there, this template that we use today, it becomes an estimating tool that in the future, what might have taken you weeks to prepare will now take you less than an hour, if not 30 minutes. Because all you have to do here we're just putting estimates. But if this is let's say this is a example of a project, and this company, let's say her name is Mary, and now she says, oh, well, here's another project. And she realizes, okay, this project's going to be a little bit bigger. So we're actually going to need 9 site visits, and the connection call is actually going to be 2 hours for people, right? You can just adjust this so quickly. All you're really doing is your units down here are going to get adjusted, maybe with some other slight variances, but it calculates it all for you. It's very, very cool. So let me change those for you. So this is an example of what hers looked like at the end, where we had all of the steps, right? So even step 3, the proposal, it was the one person writing it, and then the team had to review it. You'll see that the hours went up here because the team altogether per hour, their hourly rate combined was $142, and it was going to take 2 hours. So that's an example of what we did there. We moved into our costs, right? All of our inputs. You'll see I've changed materials to inputs because it got that stuck here. But the package, the travel, the courier charges, the client proposal piece. So actually doing the pitch. Sorry, what was that client proposal? I'm sorry, I forget what that was now, because that should be an input and I forget what that was, 125. Oh, sorry, this was confusing. There was a prospect package, and then there was also the client proposal package. So before, there was 2 different packages that went out before the business was one. And then all of their subcontractors, so designers, marketing agents, legal, construction. You see, we didn't budget anything here, but she's like, sometimes with these projects, we need to, right? So you could take some averages, but we left them here blank for this specific exercise. Phase 2, again, they just broke down every single step that happens under this development piece of it. So now they've won the business. Now what do they need to do? And I apologize because we didn't break out the specific task, but we just knew these were actually people's roles, and we knew that this person was going to have to invest 6 hours. So we did this a little bit differently here. But it's interesting because as you go through this, you'll see we did this, then under labor, under phase 3, right? All the effort and energy that goes into it. They had never done this exercise before. Under phase 3, they had an idea, but they had been completely eliminating phase 1, phase 2, and phase 4. So that was not cool for them. And then we get into phase 4, which was the defending stage, how they close it out, how they have to wrap everything up with that client, how they do the exit interview, they do the client appreciation time in, they take everybody to dinner, they do the thank you cards, right? So some good examples there for you. So when we go up, now this is an older example, so you're not going to have everything that you need in here, but it was interesting because when we added up all of their costs here, and I'm just going to get you to look at costs right now, their costs came in at about $6,000 here. We knew their billing rate, right? So according to this and where we had marked up, the billing rate had suggested $12,000, $655. And sorry, this is a finished product, but what they had actually been proposing in the past was closer to about $8,000 to $9,000 for these projects. So you can see that amount, they were just squeaking by, right? Like if we take $6,000 and divide it by an $8,000 billing rate, that's a cost of goods of 75%. And they thought their cost of goods was closer to 35 because they never factored in all of these extra costs that just get taken off of our net profit, right? That's where they get hemorrhaged. So I'm going to show you one other example here before I turn it over to you guys for questions. Let me find it. Demo here. So I'm going to show you this one because this is more representative of what your template looks like right now. So this is a training-based business. They have a course, and in this, what you will find is that now in your template, it is going to calculate all of your costs in with labor, right? So in this case, for this training program, I forget how many weeks it is, but all of their costs with their labor came out to $4,476.58. On average, this is what happens for them. Their costs without labor was $3,280. Before we started this process, I asked them to just give a guess as to what they thought their cost of goods would be. And they thought it was going to be about $2,800. They were looking at their materials, right? Everything in, they were looking at their subcontractors, the instructors, but they thought, well, on average, we're sitting at about $2,800. They charge for the course, they charge $3,500. They thought they were making money on it because their operating expenses were rather low. They said, well, $2,800, we're going to charge $3,500. They were thinking about upping it to $4,000. We did this exercise. Total costs with labor, $4,476. It's like a meet your maker moment. So this is why we do this work. So again, I am not going to pretend that this is going to be an easy exercise. It actually is if you're product-based, because you're going to go right to phase 3 and you're going to go, okay, well, here's the product. Here's what we get the product for. Yes, there's packaging. Yes, there might be some shipping and some duty. There might be some fuel involved in that. Yep, sure, we'll put in a warranty cost. So all of those little extras is going to be easier for you for sure under product. Again, unless the product that you're selling is more expensive, because there will be that education process. Even with jewelry, with art, there's an education, there's a curation that goes on. So I want you to calculate all of that, because you will most likely be very surprised to see this cost here at the end. So those equipment costs, I just realized I forgot to follow through on that. Those equipment costs that you're carrying through, you are going to be adding those most likely to phase 3 input costs, right? You can say piece of equipment, and you know what, I apologize. I should have a sample for you here, and I don't right now because it's on my other computer. But if we go, let me just take you over here, back over here for a second. So if you've got equipment, here's what I'm going to recommend you do. You go right into phase 3 and you go into inputs. And if it's not monthly reoccurring, you can just say equipment piece, whatever it is, equipment piece number 1, and units of measure. So the bigger the projects, usually let's just say day or monthly, but let's just say monthly. And now you actually know what your monthly cost is on that piece of equipment. So you can go back and let's just, you know what, it's going to take me too long to find it. But if we go back to the truck, I think the truck equipment cost per month with everything in was $1,700, right? And you're going to say, oh, well, this project is going to require it for 1 month. That is money that you haven't been pricing based on. It's just been sitting and operating. So that equipment is attached to that specific product or service for that amount of time. So I hope that makes sense for everybody. Again, this is, you're gonna have to dig deep for this one. But once you do this and you get it, this will forever change the way you look at pricing going forward. This is most likely where you are losing your money. Okay, I'm gonna unmute everybody because I'm sure there are questions. So either I've really overcomplicated this and there's gonna be just dead silence and crickets, or everyone's gonna weigh in here. Okay, bring it on. What questions do you have for me?
Sure. I don't actually have any, Tanya, but I know this is going to take a very long time.
Once you get your first one, and Sherry, in your case, you really just have to do it once, right? I know we said small, medium, large projects, but you just need to know what goes into estimating each project, and then you use the same piece for each one of them. So yeah, you have to sit down with Keith and just say, okay, dude, hit me. What goes in to this process so that you can just take notes.
Different pieces of equipment are used for different jobs, so.
Yes, so you don't need to, you know what you could do is you could say, okay, well, job one is this, job two, but you could just know on average what pieces of equipment primarily get used, right? And you don't need to list every piece here. If you don't want, you can list the primary ones. And again, just leave the units required 0, but I just want you to get an average, right? To start seeing on average for an average project, what goes into it, because they can always be modified because you don't have a set price, right? Your prices fluctuate per project. So you're especially.
We have a set price. We have a rate sheet, and each piece of equipment is charged out by the hour, or
Okay.
some pickup trucks are by the day.
Gotcha.
But most of this is going to have to be done by the hour.
Yeah, and then you're going to have to see if your rates are actually correct.
If they're right.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. That's good. That's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good start.
But a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It is. And this is why accountants don't do this, right? And bookkeepers don't. This really does fall to the business owner to fix this out, figure this out, because we then go to the bookkeeper and we say, I need you to start accounting for costs in this way, in these categories, right? So that you know that you're staying on track with each project. It is also very, very helpful with your team, because now your team is accountable. If they said it was going to take 30 minutes to do the proposal, they have to get the proposal done in 30 minutes, right? And then it's like every week you come back to it, it's like, you know what, that proposal actually took 45. So then you ask them, well, next time, is it going to be 45? And do you budget for 45 or do you budget for 30? Nobody's ever doing this math, and this is why we lose so much money every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't really do proposals. Rarely.
Okay. Estimates?
Yeah. Well, that comes, we enter tickets. Like once they're on the job,
Yeah.
the ticket's written up with, equipment, man hours, and I enter it in the system and send that estimate out for approval by the consultant, and then it's invoiced.
Yeah. So I know in my experience with tickets, where people were usually losing a lot of their money was in the capacity of each piece of equipment, right? So they're carrying all of this equipment, whether it's trucks or whatever it is, and they're only getting used 25% of the time. Yeah. So 75% they're losing money on it. They're losing time with the guy in the truck and the whole ticketing process. They're losing money on collecting their receivables. So we just switched to a credit card process, right, for the customers that weren't long-term clients. So there's definitely lots of ways for operational efficiency, especially with fuel charges, right?
I was going to say fuel and accounts receivable, because
absolutely. So
the two big oil companies we work with don't pay for 60 days.
That's right. So your fuel, you've got to forecast going forward. You can't eat that cost.
Yeah.
You can't afford to. Yeah. Yeah, those places where we're so vulnerable, you need to add layers of protection. Worst case, you can issue a refund check at the end, right? You actually saved money on this. It's not, we didn't, here's what our estimate was, we came in under, here's your refund.
But we don't actually, unless it's a bid job, there is the estimates they pay. It doesn't matter. Whatever the ticket value is, he'll honor it as long as, I've never had one rejected.
Right, but yeah, in my experience.
An estimate and we say, yeah, you'll accept it, and then we bill them and it's like, $1,000 more or $1,000 under. That doesn't happen.
Oh, well, that's nice that they're even paying when it's more. In my experience, people usually honor that estimate, and then the business owner honors the estimate, and then they lose on their
all the estimate goes out for is for that consultant to see his costs, because he's there, he knows how many hours the equipment and men work.
Yep.
And for the most cases, it's 10 hours for the man and usually 8 for the equipment, because you have to have time for warming up the equipment and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In the winter. In the winter.
Absolutely. And don't forget dispatch, right? And that time into, right? And any sort of extra services that individual needs. And all those things get missed.
Dispatch, but Keith is the one that tells them where the next job is, and they're there for 5 days or 10 days.
That's dispatch. That's Keith, right?
Well, yes.
Yeah, and if he had to hire someone for that job, so again, that's where we're losing money. That's where the business owner thinks, well, I'll just do it, and then we don't have to pay for it. And that only works up until a certain point, but you're not going to grow your business if you budget like that,
Yeah.
right?
I
Okay.
am concerned our rate sheet's not high enough.
Yeah, well, you'll know right away when you look
Yeah.
at this, right? It's like, oh, it's costing us 79 and our rate sheet says 65. In most cases, that's what's happening for a lot of businesses. Yeah. All right.
I will
Other,
ask one question then. So then
yes.
if I'm doing this and I'm putting the equipment in, so I'm not putting the equipment in at the cost for the 8 hours in the day that it worked, I'm putting it in at its cost for the whole month?
It's up to you.
No, I'd have to put it in by day.
It's totally up to you. If it's a day project, then put it
I
in
was
by
thinking I
day.
had to do it by hour, but
No, sometimes I wouldn't, because, you know, you've got to think again about your equipment. If you can't rent it out the hour after that,
no,
right,
no.
then it's really, that piece of equipment is attached to that project for, you know, however long that's going to be.
The whole duration, yeah.
There you go. So I would just, you know, and if it's monthly, then I would just put in the monthly piece, right? Because you might not be getting it back over the weekends, right? Or whatever.
Either, well, you know, it sits on the weekend.
Yeah.
Unless sometimes they work Saturday and Sunday, but not every week. Depends on how quickly the consultant wants it to get done.
Okay.
And they pay overtime for that. So
There you go. So yeah, so this, you get to decide on all of this and you get to modify it, but it's definitely an eye opener.
yeah, we never work. Well,
Right.
rarely do we have a project. Probably the longest is 3 weeks.
Okay.
It's never a whole month.
Okay.
But we have 2 or 3 possibly at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, and so this process should be done for each project respectfully, right? So that it was
Yeah, because I think I'm going to make it like small projects will be 3 days.
Okay.
Large or medium projects are going to be like, I don't know, a week to 10 days or something, and then
Okay.
the big ones are 3 weeks.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Any other questions? Anybody else have any insights, updates, questions, fears, anxieties, apprehensions about doing this exercise? Crickets. Crickets, I say. Okay. You're either feeling really confident and I've done an okay job in presenting it, or you're overwhelmed as heck. And I hope I see you on Monday. All right. Okay. You know where to find me. You've got my text 71306-713-8321. You give me a shout if you need anything. I see a picture me like the kid off Home Alone with both hands on my cheeks, screaming. Oh, I know, gang. I'm sorry to hit you with this, but I will tell you it's pretty powerful. And I have to say, when I do this coaching one-on-one with people, my mandate, it's called Plan to Profit, and it's a 12-week mandate, and it's $9,000. And this is where I earn every penny, because this is where you are losing your money, and the owner doesn't want to go through this. And yeah, I've got to set this up and then make it as easy as possible for them. So the fact that you're doing this on your own, I am there for you. I'm giving you a big hurrah and high fives, and I'm here if you have any questions. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. Just get your rough draft down to get started with. You can perfect it later on. That is A-okay. But I would love for you to share with me not only your questions, but as you go through this, any meet your maker moments where you're like, oh my goodness, I haven't been charging enough, or oh my good, maybe you have, which is great too, right? I want to hear those stories as well. So yeah, share your experiences with me. I'd love to hear them. Okay, so as Seal says, a change is going to come, and it starts by understanding our direct costs. So what can I say? I am wishing you the best of luck. You're going to do A-okay with this. It's going to be just fine. Make sure to budget the time. We'll see you on Monday. And if we need to increase our price, It'll be a great time to do our weighted pricing model so that we can defend the new price that you need to charge. Maybe, maybe not. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. I see one more chat. Yes. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. We will see you Monday. Breathe. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Off you go. Okay. See you later.